Hello, everyone. Welcome to Build Weekend Watch. My name is Matt Jacobs, and with me today to talk about this week's newest entertainment releases are HuffPost senior editor Lauren Moraski and Yahoo Entertainment senior correspondent Kevin Polowy. How are you guys?
Hey.
Very good.
Hello. Hi, guys.
We have a big weekend for movies, I think, and first up is the biggest release of the week, and that is, of course, Crazy Rich Asians. Based on the best-selling book by Kevin Kwan, the movie follows Rachel, who on a trip to Singapore for a wedding ends up discovering that her boyfriend comes from one of the wealthiest families in the country. She then has to handle that scrutiny that comes with being his girlfriend, all while dealing with his very disapproving mother. Check out the trailer.
I met a girl, I fell in love, and I want to marry her. You're Nicholas Young. You're untouchable. But Rachel's not.
Have you prepped Rachel to face the wolves?
You know I'm back, like I never left.
I really admire you. It takes guts coming all the way over here, facing Nick's family.
Another day, another breath.
I know this much. You will never be enough.
Yo, it's about time someone stood up to Auntie Eleanor. Well, you, not me. Oh, God. She can't know I was ever here.
I feel glorious, glorious. Got a chance to stop.
All right, Crazy Rich Asians has been a pretty hotly anticipated title for the past few years now, ever since Kwan's book became this kind of huge mammoth bestseller. Lauren, I know you've seen the movie. What's your takeaway?
I loved it. I saw the screening on Monday night, and it was a blast to watch.
Are you rubbing it in right now?
Yes.
The screening that I got shut out of because I showed up 10 minutes late.
Can't be late in New York. We're right on time here. Kevin's from LA, a little slower there, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't know how we work in New York here.
We don't mess around here. We started on time. He got shut out, but I was there, and it was a blast. Not only was it like funny, but I actually shed a tear or two. It was a beautiful romantic comedy, and in addition to the cultural references and the cultural meaning of this film, it's just very relatable. I mean, anybody who's been in a relationship or is dating someone who might be a little different from them can relate to something like this. I loved it. I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of the perfect cap on the summer. It's this big, frothy, opulent, beautiful-looking romantic comedy. It really, despite being a cast that doesn't look like any other cast we've ever seen in a romantic comedy, thankfully, and a story that sort of bends some of the genre's conventions. It kind of, instead of doing the boy meets girl thing, they are in a relationship when the movie first starts, and it kind of develops from there. So it's got a little bit of its own twist, but it, in its heart, is a very conventional romantic comedy, which is something, and we're going to talk about another Netflix rom-com in just a bit that's opening or premiering today. It's just really nice to see this genre get some mainstream attention again, and especially in this way that, I mean, the food porn, the fashion porn, all these Chinese covers of pop songs like Material Girl and Yellow, it just makes it such a decadent kind of feast of a movie.
And there are so many standout appearances, too, like Awkwafina, who's like this hilarious friend, and she's so great in the...
From Ocean's 8. She's having such a good scene-stealing summer.
She's so great in it. I just wanted to see her more on screen. Yeah. And the lead actor really never acted before. And I think he was a travel presenter for BBC or something, and so to pluck him out of a kind of obscurity, and now he's thrust onto the big screen in a film like this is pretty exciting, of course. And Constance Wu, who a lot of us know.
Yeah, this just feels like a cultural landmark. I mean, a cultural touchstone. So I didn't see it. I got shut out of the screen. I'm going to blame the New York transit system for that because I was stuck on the R train for 20 minutes. So it wasn't my fault.
Always a fair scapegoat.
Yes, but I'm highly disappointed I didn't see this movie. But I love just witnessing the excitement around it. I mean, the anticipation, the excitement for this film is just beautiful to behold. There are people buying out theaters again. It feels very much like the phenomenon we saw happen earlier this year with Black Panther. Yeah. This is a huge movie for Asian Americans, obviously, but I think it's going to transcend that. It's like Black Panther did. I hope it's a big hit. We had the director John M. Chu in our studios in Los Angeles, and he was talking about sort of the stakes that this film carries, because he had his own battles getting this film made. They, absurdly at one point they were telling him to change the title, just as an example, even though the book is called Crazy Rich Asians, because they thought that it could detract people or whatnot. There were other hurdles. They told them it would be tough to find an all Asian cast.
Right.
That's because there aren't enough roles being given to Asian actors right now. But the stakes are high for this one. He's talked about, he's heard, obviously he's very tapped into the industry. He's a veteran film director. He's heard that there are all these other scripts around town with not just diverse casts, like strictly ethnic casts that are in sort of limbo to see how this movie does. So it's tracking well. I hope it's a big hit.
And for him, I think as a director, I heard that he was offered to put this to Netflix, and he decided he did not want to bring it to Netflix. He wanted to bring it to the big screen for the significance of it all. And how is it tracking? Speaking of that, box office wise,
I think it's going to see I think it's pegged at about 25 million opening, 25 to 30, which is really good for a movie of this size. Yeah, and especially the movies that open bigger than that tend to be, especially in the summer, kind of more macho-driven, action spectacles. And so to see something that's a little kind of softer and bubblier get this similar amount of tension, I think is really great and interesting. And it really, you're right about the Black Panther thing. I feel like every time we get one of these sort of boundary-pushing movies, it gets put through a litmus test. Mm-hmm. We saw it with Wonder Woman. We saw it with Black Panther. Now we'll see it with Crazy Rich Asians. You just kind of swap out the demographic, and it becomes this like make or break moment for can Hollywood's, can this thrive in Hollywood? Mm-hmm. And I would really love to see us be able to graduate from those conversations after this movie. Now that we're seeing repeated success for these things, it feels like an unfair way to have to talk about these movies every single time they
past
open.
All of the firsts, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're on track for that. There are a couple of sequels to the book of Crazy Rich Asians.
That's right.
So I imagine that if this tracks well and there's some interest in it, we'll see some sequels to this potentially as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they have that lined up. I remember talking to John Chu a few years ago when he made Now You See Me Too, and he was trying to get Crazy Rich Asians off the ground at that point, and he was like, it's the thing that I really want to do more than anything else. And so to have seen him kind of come off of that journey is really amazing. It's a great, worthwhile moment for us this weekend.
Yeah, and they're saying how, there's been quite some time to see an all-Asian cast on a big screen like this, and he was very inspired by the Joy Luck Club, which opened like 20-something years ago, and we haven't seen something like that since then, so This is refreshing.
Yeah. All right, next up we have another book-to-film adaptation. This one is Juliet Naked. It stars Rose Byrne, Ethan Hawke, and Chris O'Dowd. Another rom-com. This one focused on an awkward love triangle that forms when a woman starts falling for the musician her longtime boyfriend is obsessed with. Roll that trailer.
It's really odd to be saying all this to a stranger, but I have a hunch I've wasted the last 15 years of my life.
I don't imagine this is much of a consolation, but I'm ashamed to say that 2 decades have slipped through my fingers.
At least you have a past to live up to.
Big news. I'm coming to London. Would you like to meet for a drink?
Waiting outside where you find your key.
Beautiful spot.
You're not downstairs, are you?
That's me and my high school chess club.
I can explain this. I'm not trying to trap you. Or cut your head off, or whatever.
Hey! How have you been? Duncan Thompson. Tucker Crow. I'm Stevie Wonder.
Just take it
Real
easy.
mature, Annie.
All right, back-to-back romantic comedies. That's kind of nice to start off this segment with. What do you guys think?
I love how somebody wooed when you said naked. It was like they heard the word naked and they're like, woo!
And if you watch the film, it has nothing to do with that.
There's no one named Juliet in it, and nobody is naked
False
in it.
advertising. I haven't seen it. I'm glad that we only showed 30 seconds of the trailer because I would advise not watching the full trailer, which I did in preparation for this interview. I'm pretty sure it's one of those trailers that shows you the entire plot of the movie.
Romantic comedies tend to fall into that trap because you kind of have to sort of show some kind of arc, and the arc tends to be a little on the obvious side, so you just shove it all in there. You're right. That's a good point.
Yeah, I didn't watch the trailer, but I did see the film, and I did read the book. And I was a big Nick Hornby fan. He wrote High Fidelity, About a Boy, which are both turned into films. And I read his books like very early on, as I did this. And it's weird watching it on the big screen, like this, because it's just as I imagined it. The scenes, the people. Although they do take liberties with this, and it's different from the book. It's very reminiscent of how I imagined it. So it's nice to see the music being created to go with the story, which is really cool. Ethan Hawke is not a bad singer. What do you think?
He's
not bad,
he's
right?
Not.
So he's not the songwriter. They solicited people like Conor Oberst and Ryan Adams to write the music to this. But
so you can get a sense of the type of music
yes.
from those names, Conor Oberst and Ryan Adams songs.
And I don't know about you, Matt, but I think Ethan Hawke is awesome in this.
Ethan Hawke is having a fantastic year. I think Ethan Hawke is one of our perennially underrated, underappreciated actors. He makes a lot of movies and has sort of never really had, aside from maybe the Before trilogy and a couple other things here or there, never really had something that becomes like, this is like an Ethan Hawke thing. And between First Reformed and this and the other stuff that he's up to this year, I'm just happy to see Ethan Hawke get some due, because it feels like he's a journeyman who just keeps working and working, but he's really, really good.
Yeah, and go on. Yep.
Oh, I was going to say, this feels like an all-star cast of underappreciated actors in this business. Not only Ethan Hawke, Rose Byrne, I think she is one of the most underappreciated.
Absolutely.
And Chris O'Dowd. I feel like maybe his pigeonholed himself a little bit. I think he makes almost exclusively rom-coms at this point. I want to see him do some more. But this is something I'm excited just on the basis of this triumvirate in this film.
It really speaks to regret in life. It speaks to getting older and aging and choices that you make. And it also speaks to love and loss. And it also speaks to the obsession of music and how much music can really drive you as a person, and as it does Chris O'Dowd in the film.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's keep on with a third novel-based film. This one is The Wife, and it's about Joe Castleman, who's played by Jonathan Pryce, and he's set to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature when his wife, Joan, played by Glenn Close, begins to reflect on all that she has compromised and accepted and sacrificed by kind of being near his side for a long 40 years. Take a look at The Wife.
My wife doesn't write, thank God. Otherwise, I'd suffer permanent writer's block.
Don't ever think that you can get their approval.
Who's?
The men. The ones who decide who gets to be taken seriously.
A writer has to write.
A writer has to be read, honey.
I am aware of Joe's various indiscretions. His affairs have nothing to do with you. That's a deep-seated fear of inadequacy.
Don't paint me as a victim. I am much more interesting than that.
Glenn Close is so fantastic in this movie, though I do love that Elizabeth McGovern kind of cameo that she makes. Kevin, you've seen this one. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, this is classic Glenn Close, I think. I want to just have a moment of appreciation for Glenn Close. I got to do an interview with her recently. We do a series called Roll Recall, #shameless plug, where it's a career retrospective. We talk about all of their best roles. This is a woman who didn't make her first film until she was 35, which kind of blows my mind. She was a pretty accomplished stage performer at this point. But this is the statistic that I feel like is not well known enough. Nominated for Oscars for the first 3 movies that she made. I don't think that's ever been done before. And the reason why I bring that up is because I think she could get another Oscar. She's actually currently 0 for 6. She's the only living actor with 6 nominations not to win, and I think this could be number 7. But this is classic Glenn Close. It's called The Wife. Ultimately, it's all about her. Really heartbreaking at times, a lot to say about love and commitment and heartbreak and regret. But this is a movie that you see for Glenn Close because it very quietly builds up to this explosive performance that she delivers. This is a movie that you're going to go see. I think people want to see some Glenn Close fireworks, and she fully delivers.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I mean, as a standalone movie, aside from sort of any other elements, I mean, it's a rather static kind of movie. It's not filmed in a particularly interesting way, and sort of, it sort of borrows from things that we've seen in Big Eyes and certain other movies that have been about men taking credit for their the work that's been done by women, specifically their wives or love interests. So there's a certain familiarity to it. It's based on a popular Meg Wolitzer novel, but Glenn just sells this role so much, particularly in the quiet moments when she isn't speaking. Her husband is receiving the Nobel Prize, so she's traveling off to kind of receive it with him and be part of these galas and celebrations. And there are kind of long sequences when, people are coming up to her husband to kind of compliment his work and extol his life, and she's just kind of standing idly by his side, sort of having to just maintain a good spirit, knowing that there's some twisty stuff about why maybe he's not the one who deserves the prize that he's receiving. Lauren, what did you think?
Yeah,
You read the book.
I've read the book. It's been a while, but it's again true to the book and takes some liberties, but it's very much like I imagined it. And it's been a while since I've read that book, actually. But 2 words, Glenn Close. Glenn Close, Glenn Close, Glenn Close. She's phenomenal in it. I actually like Christian Slater. He plays this kind of slimy sort of...
Christian Slater's really good at the sleaze.
He's really good in it. And Jonathan Pryce is okay. He plays the husband. But I do think it's very important that we're watching this film at this kind of time and this movement and the Me Too movement in a way, because here's this woman who's being, put down by her husband all these years and living in the dark of something. And at the end, I don't want to give the end away, but I don't want to give...
It's a really good end.
It's a
very good ending.
It's a very good ending.
Unexpected.
Yeah.
Yes, to say the least. I actually really enjoyed the direction. I loved, especially the sort of build up to all of these reveals, and just some of the cuts I thought were so choice. Like there's a scene early on in the movie when they first hear the news that he is going to get the Nobel Prize, and they cut to these 2 middle-aged people jumping up and down on the bed like they're little toddlers. Like little touches like that, little flourishes like that. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and there's so many subtleties in the movie that kind of get uncovered as the movie goes on. And actually, there's a back and forth in time, and the person who plays Glenn Close as a child, as a young woman, is actually her daughter in real life. Yeah. So that's really cool to see.
Who's done that 2 times now? She did the same thing in the comedy that came out with Ed Helms and Owen Wilson. What? Father Figures. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So because I'm like, wow, that really kind of looks like Glenn Close, and then you realize it actually is Glenn Close's daughter, and so it's a perfect fit in terms of playing her younger self.
Yeah, I would love to see her get that Oscar nomination. I mean, she has a long road ahead to, by the time nominations are announced in January. And, we haven't seen, I think, a lot of the big kind of Best Actress contenders. And I worry that this movie might be a little too small in terms of the attention that it'll receive to kind of carry over through the next 6 months. But it would be amazing. And though I would worry again, because it's too small, if she could squeak out the nomination and then lose 0 for 7.
Yeah.
She's the Meryl Streep of losing Oscars.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have some very interesting connective tissue between the things that we're talking about this week. We'll move on to another Ethan Hawke movie. This time he has his hands in another movie called Blaze, which is directed and co-written by Ethan Hawke. It centers on the life of an unsung country artist named Blaze Foley, and let's take a quick look at it.
I'm going down to the Greyhound station. Gonna get a ticket to ride. I know it's strange. Seems like since we got married, I've been gone all the time. But I'm a salesman of songs. Every song I hear about a man and woman, I think about us and cry. Feed pigeons and clay.
The thing about Blaze, he understood. If you want to write a song,
Did you bring your ass over here, ZZ Top?
everyone's going to tell you that you got to live that song.
You're a pathetic drunk.
But that is not it.
Just sing, would you?
You're going to have to die.
Another movie that I worried could get buried in kind of the shuffle of all the bigger kind of stuff that's out right now. Lauren, what did you think?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I think Ethan Hawke did a really nice job with this film. It is, Blaze Foley was a singer, very not super well known, who lived throughout the 70s. He ended up dying by a gunshot wound while standing up for a friend in 1989. And his music, though, has been covered by everyone from Willie Nelson to Merle Haggard to Waylon Jennings. So he's a songwriter through and through. Actually was on this Build stage interviewing someone that he kind of knew through the Austin days, and this man who is the front man to Asleep at the Wheel. And he said he's seen the film and it's Blaze Foley through and through. He's like, so the lead actor who plays Blaze, Benjamin Dickey, he's not a very well-known actor. Actually, this is his first ever film. He's a singer in a band, and he's a lifelong musician. And somehow Ethan Hawke picked him out of obscurity, knew him from a friend of a friend, and cast him in this film, and he does a really nice job. And so a lot of the other people in the film are musicians as well. The person who plays Townes Van Zandt is played by a musician, and a few other people are also, like Chris Christopherson's in it. So yeah, so it's very well done. The music is beautiful. They redo the songs written by Blaze Foley. It's a very much like, he's not, he's down on his luck at times, but it's really a love story at the end of the day. Blaze's, this woman that he's involved with actually wrote a book, and a lot of this is culled from that book. And so I think the love story is the strongest part of this film.
I feel like Ethan Hawke is just showing off at this point. I mean, come on, like First Reformed, which you mentioned, he got all kind of acclaim for that. It's happening again with Juliet Naked. Now he has 2 movies on the same week.
Yeah.
So he wrote and directed this film, and by all indications, probably the best thing he's directed. I know we'll take him down a peg. He's had some mixed results for things he's directed in the past. The Hottest State, Chelsea Walls, not Barn Burners, but this is a film that seems universally loved, and I feel like is gonna trigger some more Ethan Hawke joints in the future.
Yeah, Ethan Hawke has such an interesting career because I feel like he's somebody who, and he reflects this when you hear him in interviews, who works just for the love of it. And I think because he works as frequently as he does, a lot of his stuff tends to feel sort of slight and dismissible, with the exception of your Boyhoods and your Befores and whatnot. And I don't know that I don't know. I guess
he's kind of working exclusively outside of the studio system.
Yeah,
these days,
right. With the exception of that Purge movie that he
right.
made.
Yeah, we got to pay the bills somehow.
We don't need to talk about that. Actually, it's an okay movie.
I'll take more Ethan Hawke, actually. After seeing these 2 films, I'll take more Ethan Hawke. He actually makes an appearance in this film too. So if you see it, you have to watch closely. You'll see some Ethan Hawke.
He's got a Hitchcock cameo.
Yeah, you'll see like the back of his head or something like that. So.
All right, well, we're big Ethan Hawke fans around here, clearly. All right, this next drama explores the lives of 3 boys who must fend for themselves when they start to realize that their parents' volatile relationship can no longer provide the stability that they need. Here is the trailer for We're the Animals.
I need you to be good and quiet around your mom.
It's my birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday, old man.
Do you think Pops will ever come back?
He always comes back.
God, starving.
Ring.
Hello?
Mommy, how come you didn't answer the phone when I call you?
'Cause you sound so ugly. Hello?
Hello?
What are we gonna do?
Come on.
Just hearing that score sort of puts me back in the mindset of this movie, which I actually saw way back in January, and it stuck with me pretty strongly. I had a long interview, went to breakfast with Raul Castillo, the star of the movie, for a profile that we're going to run on HuffPost on Sunday, with some beautiful photography accompanying it, that beautiful, talented Raul Castillo. And I think that he is phenomenal in this movie. I think this movie sort of, I walked out of it feeling like this was Beasts of the Southern Wild meets Moonlight, to point to 2 kind of cultural touchstones of the past a few years from kind of the diverse indie cinema world. This sort of has an even more intimate feel than those 2 movies did. It has this kind of this grainy aesthetic to it, and this sort of impressionistic vibe that kind of flits back and forth, incorporating the hand-drawn illustrations that the lead boy in the movie journals, basically, and those get incorporated into the story in this really kind of dynamic way, as he is, at a very young age, sort of contending with the early stages of his queer identity as his parents' relationship sort of implodes. And I think this movie does an incredible job of making you sympathetic to everyone's condition in it, including Raul Castillo, whose character really struggles to break out of a sometimes violent domestic cycle. And only somebody as charming as Raul Castillo, who you might know from Looking and Atypical and 7 Seconds and Unsane, could pull off something like that. Lauren, you liked it a lot, too.
I liked it a lot. I think you described it perfectly. And for someone who hasn't seen it since January, I couldn't do it better than you just did. But that said, I loved it as well. It's beautifully shot. It's hard to watch at times because you're watching and you're like, oh man, like you're rooting for this family and these kids, and there's some moments where it's hard. They're struggling financially, and there's a moment where Raul Castillo's character says, we're never going to escape this, and you actually believe that, and you're like, you're not going to escape this, and maybe you will, maybe you won't. And so I all I have to say is I would see it. Go see this film.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, we've definitely hit on a theme today of all these Sundance releases. And I missed Sundance this year, so I missed a few of these movies. But I wonder, you see this every year where all of these buzzy Sundance movies I don't want to say they're dumped in August. They're all released in August. There's not, when it comes to independent film, there's not really a dumping ground like you have for a lot of the mainstream stuff we're seeing released right now. But I wonder if it would better the independent studios to sort of spread these out a little bit more, because I feel like they might cannibalize each other. Like there's a lot of films for indie fans to catch up on.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that August in general becomes sort of a punching bag in the movie world. Less so now that we have things like Crazy Rich Asians opening, but it tends to be kind of, you get most of your blockbusters are sort of your runoff from the rest of the summer, and then your indie movies. I'm hard-pressed to sort of think of an August release that's really broken out because it lacks such an identity. You get your big, huge spectacle movies in May, June, July, and then right after Labor Day, we're full throttle into award season, and it's like prestige movie after prestige movie, so to speak, 1 week after the next. And so August has this weird sort of identityless kind of middle ground, and that's where they put a lot of these Sundance movies that aren't going to go on to be big Oscar contenders, that are just a little bit too small, a little bit too weird, whatever, to kind of get that sort of attention. And it's a shame. It is a shame for movies like this that really need every dollar it can get to sort of prove its worth commercially.
Yep.
All right, well, we'll switch over to Netflix now, which released earlier today on the platform a movie called To All the Boys I've Loved Before. And this puts us back into the romantic comedy mode that we've been in throughout this segment. It's a Netflix original film about a teenager who has to handle the worst nightmare of her life when she finds out that her treasured love letters have been inexplicably sent out to all of her crushes. And that does sound like a nightmare. Roll the trailer.
Hey, can I talk to you? I really appreciate it, but it's never gonna happen.
I'm sorry, what?
I think it's really cool that you think I have golden specks in my eyes.
Oh my God, it's Josh.
Oh my God.
Oh, okay.
The letters are out. Women.
Tell me about it.
Here's the thing. I had to make it look like I liked you so somebody else wouldn't think I liked them.
What if we let people think that we were actually together?
Let's do this.
I'm sad to say this movie wasn't really on my radar until just a couple of days ago, and it's getting all sorts of attention and buzz. Kevin, this was your
you just summed up
thing.
Netflix original films.
You're
in
right.
general,
You're
I
right.
think.
Yeah.
They just kind of like come out of nowhere, and you're like, where did this movie come from? This is not something I would normally dial up on Netflix. I watched it. I had the pleasure of interviewing Lana Condor here on Monday, and I really enjoyed it. It's super sweet. It's super funny. It's super entertaining. It definitely has shades of a John Hughes movie. I mean, I know that comparison gets,
we say everything
gets overused
anytime
there's a good anytime there's a good contemporary teen romance, but it really does, and it clearly took cues from John Hughes movies. There's a hilarious segment in the film where she's watching 16 Candles, and they kind of comment on that film's awful Asian stereotype. But I think there's a couple things that make this movie work so well. One is Lana Condor. I think she is one of the most exciting young actors to come up in recent years. If you're not familiar with her, she actually made her debut in X-Men Apocalypse. She was in Patriots Day. She's going to be in this new sci-fi series that the Russo brothers produced called Deadly Class. She's in Alita: Battle Angel with directed by Robert Rodriguez. That's going to come out later this year, and she's great. She's super charming. She's magnetic. She holds the weight of this film. She's definitely a future star. I think the other thing that makes this film effective is that there's this love triangle. And really, I think one of the hallmarks of a great romantic comedy is you watch one of these movies going, who should she be with? You really are going to go back and forth. There's sort of some moral, ethical issues that arise with one that make the decision a little bit easier. But yeah, this is one, I think it's going to be in the conversation when we talk about, this has been buzzy lately, the return of the rom-com. Don't miss this one.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I feel like we sort of regurgitate that idea every time a semi-decent romantic comedy arrives. Rom-coms are back, and it sort of almost becomes like, well, where did they really go if they're always constantly back? I mean, we just had this conversation, 2 months ago when Step It Up premiered on Netflix. If you guys saw that one, which sort of has a similar tone to this. But I mean, Crazy Rich Asians, Juliet Naked, and To All the Boys I've Loved Before in one weekend. I mean, I guess we have to do the it's back narrative, right? I mean, it really does seem like...
I love rom-coms. I'm excited to check this out. I'm going to add it to my Netflix queue.
Yeah, and with Crazy Rich Asians, we talked about, this watershed moment for young Asian American actors, who we hope get more roles like this. Lana Condor, and I think it's a big month beyond Crazy Rich Asians. You have her starring in this film, watershed moment. You have John Cho in Searching, which comes out in a couple of weeks. That is a film I loved and can't wait to talk about more.
It's a good movie.
So yeah, hopefully this will just be part of the conversation that we will no longer have to have at some point.
Yes, exactly. All right, well, moving along, we have a new show from the creator of the beloved animated series The Simpsons and Futurama. It's a new Netflix animated series called Disenchanted. And we'll check this one out.
Isn't there a point in everyone's life where they need to go and figure out who they are? Whew, I'm a good butcher.
This is a pet shop.
Woohoo! What's this feeling I don't want to drink away?
That's hope.
I've got a bad idea!
What's bad about it? Oh, never mind, I see!
I'm so proud of you.
I'm drowning!
I'm Elfo!
All right, I'll start by asking what each of your relationships is to Matt Groening's work and The Simpsons and Futurama.
Yeah.
So
long-running series.
Yeah, I mean, I remember The Simpsons growing up. It debuted was in 1991. Was that? I don't even know. Has it been on that long?
I think it was 1951.
Yeah, 1951.
It's
so, of course,
time.
The Simpsons have been a part of my life for a very long time. But it's one of those things that you kind of forget is on because it's on all the time, right? So, but yeah, I respect The Simpsons. I mean, it's done so much. So
Huge Simpsons fan, not so much Futurama is where I would place myself in that.
All right, so as a huge Simpsons fan, are you attracted to Disenchantment?
I've watched the first couple episodes. I got to talk to Matt Groening at San Diego Comic-Con. I was kind of surprised to find out the inspiration behind this because I assumed, even watching a couple episodes, that this was sort of his reaction to Game of Thrones.
It has a Westeros feel to it.
Yeah, so to go a little further back, Lord of the Rings. It feels very much like his reaction. He's going to do a genre spoof, much in the same way that Futurama spoofs sci-fi, right? And he insists that this was actually inspired by a kind of a childhood fascination with Rocky and Bullwinkle, because they used to do this segment called Fractured Fairy Tales, and that's where the idea came from. He even actually asked his writing team not to watch any of those, to stop watching those shows because they don't want to directly reference them too much in the show. I would put I've seen, I'm not a huge Futurama fan. I think it definitely has its merits. It's definitely funny. I'm gonna put this squarely in the Futurama camp for, as opposed to sort of like future classic like this. You could argue some people would say Futurama is its own classic in its own way, but it feels very similar. I love the characters. It's definitely graining humor to a key. The casting is great. Abby Jacobson is this drunk, centered around this drunken princess. She has these two sidekicks. There's like an elf. There's a demon that follows her, Nate Faxon, and Eric Andre. I mean, the casting is spot on. I love the sense of humor is great. There's a hilarious, just to give you like one small anecdote. There's a point where the elf gets summoned to death, and he's sent to hang on a sugar plum tree. That just kind of like nails like that kind of humor. But yeah, it definitely hangs its hat on genre tropes, much in the same way as Futurama. And I would say quality-wise, I would put it right along the lines of Futurama as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. The Simpsons is one of my pop culture blind spots that I'm most embarrassed about. I mean, I've seen an episode or two, but I really am super unfamiliar with it, and now it's so long running that I'm just like, where to even begin? And I watched the first episode of this and maybe sort of realized why I haven't exactly gotten into The Simpsons. It just didn't mesh for me, and I was sort of reading about it afterward, and I'm getting the sense that each episode that there's not a whole lot of connective tissue between the episodes, that everyone's kind of like a standalone involving the same characters, but standalone adventures, which sort of turns me off even more. But you've seen one more episode than I have. Did you find that to be?
Yeah. I don't think it's serialized much like his other shows. I think that's part, that's why the Simpsons kids haven't aged in 45 years. I think that's sort of his MO. It's all it's episodic, right? But I think his fans are gonna like this because I mean just in terms of just purely being on brand, this is Matt Groening, like that style of absurdist, of very very relevant, the very timely jokes, despite being set in the Middle Ages. So I think his fans are going to eat it up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so thinking back on everything that we've covered, I think we have about 7 or 8 things that we just kind of whipped through. What are your top 2 picks for the weekend, Lauren?
I say if you want to go to the theater, check out Crazy Rich Asians. It's a good time. You still need to go. Yeah. And then I'm torn between Juliet Naked and Blaze, but either one.
Yeah, I'm going to say at the theater, Crazy Rich Asians, because that's where I'm going to be at some point. And I would say on Netflix, to All the Boys I've Loved.
Oh, yes, that's right. I have to add that to my queue this weekend. Yeah, I mean, we're all on the same page on Crazy Rich Asians. I mean, it is the movie event of the weekend. I hope it does even more than 25 million, that it's tracking. It'd be nice to see it be, as much of an outsized success. I mean, Wonder Woman and Black Panther, not to go back to the litmus test thing, but both of them sort of outpaced their box office forecasts. And I wouldn't be shocked if Crazy Rich Asians does too, given the following that it has. But other than that, I'll vouch for, again, We the Animals, which sort of exists in kind of the sort of filmmaking mode that I kind of most respond to, which is just very stripped down and intimate and interesting. And Raul Castillo gives one of the performances of the year. So thank you so much for being here. That does it for this weekend's Build Weekend Watch. And as always, thank you guys for tuning in. And of course, to Lauren and Kevin for joining me. Everyone have a great weekend.